again, this is our continuing look at Chapter 7, Long-Term Memory, Encoding, and Retrieval. So this is what we were doing before, it's been a while. This is what we were doing before the extended spring break. And this was the class before my unfortunate food poisoning incident. So this is going back a little bit, and it's kind of appropriate we're talking about memory because we're going to have to pull on our own memory in order to recall what we were looking at. So we were about to discuss two issues or two phenomena that are in psychology that we're trying to explain. The first phenomena has to do with infantile amnesia. So we were thinking cognitive beings from birth, and we showed memory in those times. So we learned how to walk. We learned procedural memories. We learned how to talk. We learned the names of different objects. We learned names of different objects, semantic memory. We learned explicit forms of memory. We had memory as children. The question is that we're going to try to address is, where has that memory gone? How come we don't remember what it's like prior to usually around 3 years of age? So we're going to continue our look at infantile amnesia. And we're also going to take a very challenging look at really interesting research that is being done using the basic idea that memory is reconstructive, that memories are reformed every single time we remember something, that is being used to treat individuals who have very traumatic memories, almost in a way that erases a portion of their memory, specifically the emotional portion. And we will see work on that in this sort of almost science fiction type of advances that you can do with psychology once you understand the fundamentals. So on that note, let's get going. On today's class, we're going to do encoding specificity brief recaps, just a real brief recall of what we were looking at beforehand, because we need to understand encoding specificity to deal with infantile amnesia. Specifically, we're going to extend what we did last time and take a look at a very specific type of context that has profound implications on infantile amnesia, which is the context of the self, the idea of the self, that sort of identity that you carry around with you continuously, that feeling and context of you being you. So we're going to take a look at how important that is for memory and how it could possibly explain infantile amnesia. We're then going to switch gears to memory reconstruction. And we're going to start with an example from science fiction, a movie called Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. And that is going to be our intro to a science fact, which is the story of Genevieve. So we're going to see a very interesting case study of where a woman who experienced rape and the traumatic memories that are associated with that is being treated so that those memories actually can become less traumatic. So let's begin with a brief recap of encoding specificity. So encoding specificity is the phenomena or the idea that when we encode information, when we remember something, we also encode things that we're not trying to remember specifically, but that are associated with that information, specifically the context. What was around when we learned that information? What were the stimuli that were around when we encoded that particular information? We also encode that context along with the information. We're not trying to encode the context, but we do encode the context because it is specific to the environment that we encoded that information. So if this is true, then it follows that we should be able to use that context as a cue for memory retrieval because it is associated with the memory. So it should be able to be used as a cue to recall that memory. And as we saw in our COG lab on encoding specificity, when you encode, and that's on the x-axis, when you encode using a strong cue, then you are best at retrieving when you use a strong cue. So that is this bar over here. So when you encode with a strong cue, your memory is best, the bar is highest when you also retrieve with a strong cue. However, it's not just that strong cues are better, because when you encode with a weak cue, when that is the context that you use to encode, you're actually better at recalling using that weak cue, indicating that even though you're not trying to learn that cue, you are better at recalling with the cues that you encoded. And that is encoding specificity, that when you have matching cues, you have better memory. And part of the cues that you use, part of those memory associations that you have in your memories are the things that were around, that were present, the stimuli that you had when you encoded the information you were trying to remember. So matching cues equals better encoding. And we use this idea to start our look at infantile amnesia and tying it to this idea of encoding specificity. So very briefly, infantile amnesia is the phenomenon that most people, if you ask them what their earliest memory is, they can't give you valid, real, corroborated memories before the age of about 3 to 4. And if you take a look at memory curves, if you take a look at how much information do you recall at different periods of your life, you will see that on the right side of this graph, that is the present. So go as far right as you can. That is literally the present. And you can see that our memory is best for the present. The lines are the highest for the present. That's not surprising. What is surprising, though, is that it actually fluctuates as you go back over time. So in your immediate past, not that much lower amounts of memory than in your slightly distant past. And then it drops off as you turn young until you reach an end stage where that is the earliest thing that you can recall. However, you weren't born in that blue box. You were born in the green box. So the question that we're trying to answer here is, what happened to those memories? How come we cannot recall those particular memories? And one of the possibilities has to go with encoding specificity and how much different the environment was when you were a baby versus when you're an adult. So on the top of this slide, we have your world as a baby. On the bottom of this slide, we have your world as an adult. And when you're an adult and you're looking at, for example, a face, that's the face that you see. You see a face with corrected vision, with 20/20 vision. It's sharp and it's in focus. That's the context that you encode. You encode sharp. You encode in focus. You encode those details that can help you remember this particular face later on. Babies live in a very different world. They live in a world of 2400 vision. And because of that, the context that they encode with these memories is very, very different. So when you are given these cues as an adult, they don't match the cues that you had as a child. When you're given the cues of sharp and in focus as an adult, that doesn't match the cues of blurry and out of focus as a baby. And that could be one of the potential reasons why it's difficult to access those memories. Another potential difference is just the scale of your environment. That's the chair that you live with as an adult on the bottom. That's the chair you lived with as a child. Chairs were much, much bigger when you were a child, and you saw them from a much different vantage point. And then one last example, if you were at a party as an adult, that is your view of the party room. That is your view of the individuals at that particular party. If you walked into that party as a child, that is your view of that particular party. Much different context. So what you encode as a child has different contextual cues than what you are exposed to as an adult. So it's as if a child you encoded with a strong cue, but then as an adult you're trying to recall with a weak cue. And that mismatch could potentially account for infantile amnesia. So that mismatch could be the reason why the context that you encoded during your memories as a child, as an infant, that context does not help this adult to recall that information, because the context that they have available, that context shown on the bottom of this slide, the bottom right of the slide, the clear baby face, that context doesn't match. And in the environment, the context that you have as a child doesn't match the context that you've been given as a recall cue. And at that party, the context that you have as a child doesn't match the context that the adult has when they're looking at that party. So we ended with this example here of just how different your experiences are as an adult versus your experiences as a child. So this is something that happens to children. They get picked up, they get thrown over their mother or father's shoulder, and that's something that they experience. That doesn't happen to adults. So really think about, when was the last time somebody actually picked you up and threw you over their shoulder? So unless you live with She-Hulk in your life, that's probably not going to happen. But a very interesting possibility is that if this actually ever did happen to you as an adult, you might get flooded with memories of your time at the beach and the time that your mother did throw you over her shoulder and just walk around with you. So that is a possibility. That is something that encoding specificity would predict. Now, at this point, we're going to delve a little bit more into the context that they have, the context of these memories. And we're going to take a look at a very, very important context. And that context is the idea of the self. So the self is almost like a hidden context, because the self is with you everywhere you go, right? Wherever you are, there, that's where you are, right? So wherever you go, that's where you are. So in that case, it's very important to remember that the self is a context for every single memory that you form as an adult, that you form as a child after you develop that sense of a self, after you develop that unbroken narrative of you as a person. So that last piece of context that might be missing, and it might be that key piece of context, is the idea that as a child, you might not have access to this self, to this context that you are exposed to as an adult. So we're going to take a look at that right now. So we're going to take a look at a very interesting study that illustrates the importance of the self in contributing to memory and making memory. And the link for this, if you can't see it on the video, the link for this is in the lecture slides. So feel free to open that up and watch it on your own time. We're going to let it run through for this video here, and then we'll discuss it a little bit once it's done.
Professor Mark Howe is looking for the key change that enables memory to begin in children. He's devised a cunning experiment to find it. And it requires several toddlers and a little deception.
This is a test of self-recognition. What we're interested in is the child's ability to know that they are someone, that they are separate from other people. And this test captures that.
You think maybe I can sit with him?
What Mark is looking for is evidence of an elusive thing, the beginning of your sense of self. To find it, the child is seated in front of a mirror and allowed to examine their own reflection. Jake goes first.
What we're interested in there is that just to see how they react to their own mirror image. And then we turn the mirror around so that they no longer see their reflection.
Next, Jake's mum is given a tissue with some paint on it, and unbeknown to him, she wipes it on his nose.
And what we're interested in is the child's reaction to their mirror image now that paint's been applied to their nose.
What's that?
Ben's not smiling, he's not happy this time. I think Ben's a bit tired.
Jake, Ben, Neve, May, Isabella and Harry all point at the mirror rather than at their own nose.
When they point at the mirror and touch the mirror rather than touching themselves, it's an indication that they don't understand that it's themselves that has been changed from the paint being applied. And they think it may be something that has to do with what's on the mirror.
But But some of the other children do show what Mark is looking for.
The child is wiping the paint off their own nose. What it indicates is that they now recognize this is a feature of themselves. This is something that shouldn't be there. This is not part of who I am. I don't recognize this as part of me.
Mark believes the fact that Toby and Jenny passed the mirror test, while the others didn't, has a greater significance and is tied to their ability to remember events. To see if this is true, next, Mark leads the children through a second test.
In the next part, what we do is we bring the children into a new room that they've never been in before. And the intent here is to create a new memory for them. And what the memory is going to be putting a lion, a cuddly lion, not a real one, to bed. And then what we'll hope for is in 2 weeks' time that the children will be able to remember this event and eventually be able to find the lion and recreate the same behaviors.
So, 2 weeks later, the children return to the same room to see whether they have formed an autobiographical memory. That is, a memory for the event of putting Leonard to bed.
Well, can you show me where my lion was? Can you remember where the lion is? Can you show me?
Ben, Jake, May, Isabella, Neve and Harry are all unable to find Leonard the lion.
Lion? Where's lion?
But Jenny and Toby do better.
Is there lion here? I've completely forgotten.
Is he in here?
That's what I said, isn't it?
So the children who passed the mirror self-recognition test 2 weeks ago and who also had autobiographical memory today were Jenny and Toby.
Mark believes this is evidence that a sense of self is necessary before children can start to form memories for events that happen to them.
So this is the key to the onset of autobiographical memory. Before that, we may have memories for events. We may have memories for things that occurred, but they're not things that occurred to us. They're just things. What makes these events more memorable, what makes them autobiographical, is this emergence of this self, and that now these events aren't just simply events, they're events that happen to me.
All right, so as we saw in that study, that sense of self, that developing sense of self, that ability to know that the person in the mirror is you, and to interact with that red dot on your nose, that led to the ability to find where the lion was hiding in the other room, to remember where that lion was hiding. And that idea of that self being carried with you, that unbroken self that is there with you as a context to tie your memories to, is related to that idea of encoding specificity, where the self is always there and can always act as a cue for you to remember the information that you have. And before you develop a self, you don't have that context. So as an adult, as a grown individual, you have a self that can act as a cue to help you remember your episodic memories. Before you develop that self, you don't have that particular self to act as a cue. So it's quite possible that all those memories that came before, they are all lost to time because you just don't have the right cues to access them, specifically that very important cue of that idea of a self. All right, so now we're going to turn to a very different type of issue, which is traumatic memories. So memories of traumatic events, memories that come with a very high emotional toll and a very high emotional component to them, and are often very difficult to get past and very difficult to live with. So these are memories that are so severe that they impact your life. They impact your ability to live your life and therefore become a illness, a mental health issue that can vastly affect your psychological well-being. So we're going to introduce the idea of memory reconstruction now so that we can take a look at exactly how psychology is using the basic fundamentals of how our memory works in order to help these individuals suffering from these traumatic experiences. So the idea of memory reconstruction, this is the idea that when you recall a memory, you're not just accessing something like a file that you've stored away somewhere in your mind. You're actually recreating or reconstructing, remaking this memory that you are bringing up, that you are recalling. So every single time you recall a memory, you rewrite that memory with each recall. You rewrite, recreate, reconstruct that memory. And that reconstruction puts that memory into a very vulnerable state. So we're going to see how this is being used in science, in psychology, to help people with traumatic memories. And what we're going to see is that this is very, very close to a science fiction concept that's been used, the idea of being able to reconstruct your memories, remake your memories. And this was one of the places that it was used was in a movie called The Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. So we are now going to turn to that movie for a few examples first of the science fiction aspect of this, so you can see just how closely the actual science fact is to what was once thought to be pure science fiction. So we're going to start off with the trailer for those of you that haven't seen the movie so that you can get the basic premise. And then we're going to take a look at an example that kind of ties into that encoding specificity idea from infantile amnesia. And we're going to finish it off with the story of Genevieve, a case study of somebody being treated for just these types of traumatic memories.
Hello, I'm Howard Mirziak, founder and president of Lacuna Incorporated. Why remember a destructive love affair? Here at Lacuna, we have perfected a safe, effective technique for the focused erasure of troubling memories. In a matter of hours, our patented non-surgical procedure will rid you of painful memories and allow you a new and lasting peace of mind you'd never imagined possible.
This is a hoax, right? I assure you no. Is there any risk of brain damage?
It's on a par with a night of heavy drinking. Nothing you'll miss.
Sun is shining in the sky. There ain't a cloud in sight. It's not raining. Everybody's in the place. And don't you know, it's a beautiful day. Hey, running down the avenue, see how the sun shines brightly in the city, on the streets where once was painted crystal blue.
Can you hear me? I don't want this anymore. I want to call it off.
All right, so that was a scene from, or that was a trailer for Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. What we're going to do now is we're going to go to a scene where the main characters are going through the procedure. So Jim Carrey's character has signed up for the procedure and has changed his mind. His memories are being erased, but he's changed his mind. He doesn't want all of his memories of his girlfriend to leave him. So they devise a plan where he's going to hide out. And interestingly, he's going to hide out in a childhood memory. He's going to hide her in a childhood memory. And as you watch this, remember our discussion of encoding specificity and think about how different the world is when you're a child versus when you're an adult. And you'll see exactly what I mean when we watch this next clip.
What if you take me somewhere else? Somewhere where I don't belong? And we hide there till morning?
Man, I can't remember anything without you.
That's very sweet, but try, okay?
Okay. Row your boat gently down the stream.
Merrily, 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 such a sweet dream. It's working. Genius.
Listen, I'm just gonna go get a salad bowl. Can you stir the soup and can you keep an eye on Joel? He just likes to be near me.
Absolutely.
Jim, it worked. Oh my God, look at this. Wow, it worked. Look at this dress, man. Oh my God, look at it. I wish I could take it with me. Who am I?
Mrs. Hamlin.
Right, Mrs. Hamlin.
I must be about 4. Oh my gosh.
Got the salad bowl, so I'm serving salad and string beans. Is he handed it? You know, you're all right. God, honestly, I feel like I could clean up all day. Listen, would you hate me if I asked you to clean some string beans?
No, not at all. God, I love this kitchen.
Thank you so much.
She's not looking at me. She's busy. She's not looking at me. No one ever looks at me. I want my mommy.
Oh, baby Joel. Hey, Joel.
Is every little peanut under there okay?
Mm-hmm, he's fine.
All right, so we can see in that clip just how different Joel's life was as a baby, right? We don't fit under tables anymore. We don't walk around in a world filled with giant women anymore. So again, that idea of encoding specificity kind of ties into this example here, where you can see that the context that was encoded along with Joel's 4-year-old memories is vastly different than the context that he uses now, that's present now, to be used as a cue. So again, that could be potentially where this this idea of infantile amnesia comes from. But that was just to tie back into the previous example. What we're looking at right now is, what about this idea of memory reconstruction? How can we use this memory reconstruction? And we're going to take a look right now at a very, very interesting study that has to do with a woman who was the victim of sexual assault, had traumatic memories associated with that sexual assault that were impacting her daily life, where she could not live her life the way that she wanted to because of those memories. And we're going to see the treatment that she goes to that ties directly into this idea that you reconstruct your memories, you remake your memories every single time that you recall them. And that makes them vulnerable, and psychology can use that vulnerability for good, as we're going to see in this example from the story of Genevieve.
There are many consequences of our brains not operating like computers. And one is that we remember things better that are more important to us. Another difference is that events in your memory cannot be deleted at will. And this can have negative consequences, because by adulthood, almost 10% of us will experience something we would rather forget.
Each day, the bad memories come back to me. The emotions are so big that in my heart hurts. It's difficult to go out of my house. I feel really, it's dangerous. People are dangerous. I feel that.
Genevieve's traumatic memories date from one night 9 years ago when she was sexually assaulted.
When I met the guy, he was a really, really great dancer. And I love dance and I wanted to be a dancer. So I went to him, I said, hi, I think you're a really great dancer, etc. And we talked a bit and he started like to touch me and try kissing me. And I remember I was telling no. I remember that there was like something in my head, like, Genevieve, stop. I wanted like to stay alive. I didn't know this man. Will he stop before killing me?
Professor Alain Brunet is an expert in treating memory disorders.
Post-traumatic stress disorder is what happens to a substantial minority of people in the aftermath of trauma exposure. It's basically an encounter with death. And the nature of the traumatic memory is that it doesn't fade away, because it's as if the imprint was so strong that in some people the memory remains as fresh as on the first day.
Today, Genevieve will be taking part in a scientific trial which sounds more like science fiction.
So, welcome. First of all, you're going to be taking the medication, then we'll be waiting for a little while. Then you will be asked to write down what happened to you.
The memory of her trauma, so deeply embedded in her brain, will be changed simply by swallowing a pill. The drug is propranolol, a beta blocker originally designed to treat raised heart rates.
Okay, very good. So I'll see you later. Okay. Propranolol is very safe. It's been around for more than 40 years. But reports had come out that one of the side effects of the drug was, had to do with memory. And so that put some people on the trail.
So as Genevieve brings back her memory by writing down the details of her assault, the drug gets to work. The idea is not to totally erase the memory, but to tone it down.
If you consider a breaking up or losing someone you love, at the very beginning, the memory is very emotional and very painful. And as time goes by, you can recall that bad memory, but the emotion is less strong. And this is exactly what we're trying to do.
The fact that a memory can be changed or toned down at all represents a breakthrough in the understanding of memory. For over a century, scientists have known that memory is stored within the connections between brain cells. To form each connection, the cells grow towards each other so that signals can pass more readily between them. But how these connections represent an experience is not understood.
How it's stored is one of nature's magnificent secrets. That's one of the things that everybody wants to know the answer to.
How can something so complex as a memory be conjured from mere connections between cells?
You're asking the most fundamental question in brain research. It's not specific to memory. It's how do we represent things, even in the here and now? How do I store what you look like in the context of these connections amongst brain cells? And memory also has that challenge, because not only is it representing what you look like, it in some ways representing what you look like yesterday.
What scientists were certain about was that once a memory was formed, it was fixed forever. But new research has overturned even that, and shows that recalling a memory makes it malleable again.
When you bring a memory back, it becomes fluid again, and it needs to be recorded again. And that's a very recent finding, because we used to think that only new memories were initially fluid and malleable. And then recently we've come to realize that even old memories can have that property.
So an old memory that is recalled is malleable, and in this state, its restorage can be blocked by propranolol. The drug seems to work by inhibiting the proteins which would enable the memory to be saved again.
We're not exactly sure why it's only emotional memory that's being affected, but we know for sure that this is the case, and that remains to be better understood.
Once a week for the past 6 weeks, Genevieve has been taking the drug and recalling her memory. Today she will be tested to see if her symptoms are improved.
You can move it onto any of these numbers that best reflect how you feel, okay?
Vous vous penchez en arrière, vous êtes détendu, vous sentez une légère brise, chaude et douce, qui traverse le porche. Une grande étendue.
Genevieve has read an account of her trauma based on what she wrote in the first week. Measures of her physiological reaction, heart rate, sweating palms, will reveal any improvement.
Et vous appréciez cette belle journée d'été, mais il ne vient pas. Quand vous raccrochez, l'homme comprend dans vos yeux. Il essaie de vous embrasser, assis près de vous sur le divan. Vous le repoussez à plusieurs reprises, mais vous n'y arrivez pas. Il vous répète qu'il ne va pas entrer à l'intérieur.
When she listened to the second part of her trauma script, she was much less reactive than the first time. She was quite reactive when she was listening to the account, but when she was imagining the account, she was much less reactive, which is a good news.
Alain also bases his prognosis on a questionnaire filled out each week by Genevieve.
According to the questionnaire, Genevieve's symptoms have decreased by more than 1/3 over a period of 6 weeks, and this is really substantial. In fact, Genevieve has gone below the threshold which is typically associated with PTSD. So she has improved tremendously.
I think that was the hardest day here. It was like all the emotions together, but there's a lot of concrete improvement. The memory comes in my head less time each day, so I'm happy with the improvement.
This is the most exciting thing in the area of PTSD in decades. I think we're really on the verge of an important breakthrough for people with PTSD.
For people like Genevieve, it's tempting to hope that in the future, such difficult memories might not just be toned down, but erased altogether.
That's a very human wish, but it's not possible, and it would not be a good thing. Our identity is based on our memories, on the memories of what happened to us, and there needs to be a continuity in time as to who we are and what experiences we've had, and we learn with our experiences as well. So erasing memories would not be a good thing.
All right, so there we have the story of Genevieve. We have the story of a basic psychological principle about how memories work being used to make huge, huge differences in the lives of this particular individual and in the lives of other individuals going through similar traumatic experiences. So I want to touch on one last little thing that the researcher mentioned in this video was his conclusion about, we cannot erase memories wholesale. We can't get rid of the entire memory yet. And we wouldn't even really want to, because we need to have a sort of continuous feeling of existence, that continuous feeling of the self, that you existed at this time, and that sort of unbroken narrative of your own life. And this just kind of reminded me of a particular instance that I went through. And anybody who has gone through a concussion will know this particular experience as well. So a little over a year ago in October, I had a cycling accident. I was on my bicycle. I slipped, taking a corner. I fell down, and I hit my head hard enough that it cracked my helmet, and I also ended up with a concussion. That happened about on the corner of Ruskin and Twickenham. And from that point where just before I took that corner to the point where I ended up in my office, I have no memory whatsoever. I have a broken narrative in my life. I have a lost time experience. And looking back on that, it is one of the weirdest things I've ever experienced in my life. To know that you were around, but not have that continuous feeling of you being there is just something that's very profoundly unique and not a readily experienced phenomenon. So imagine that multiplied by 100 if you could selectively get rid of memories from your past, even traumatic ones. It would break that narrative. It would break that sense of yourself. And we don't know as psychologists what that impact would be. And according to this particular researcher, not something that would be very good. So that's where we're going to leave today. So that is what we are doing for today. Thank you for joining me, and I will see you next time for this online adventure. Take care of yourself.